The discovery of the impossible. It was an ordinary day for the crew of the Starfinder, a deep space exploration ship that roamed the far reaches of the galaxy. The crew had seen many strange things: comets with ice like no one had ever studied, distant stars that burned brighter than anything they had ever encountered. But nothing could have prepared them for what lay ahead. They were deep in uncharted space, far beyond the borders of any known star system. It was a quiet part of the galaxy where only the bravest or most foolish ventured. The instruments on the ship blinked and hummed as they passed through a patch of dark space where no star could be seen. Suddenly, the scanners beeped. A signal, faint but unmistakable. Captain Mark Henson stood at the front of the bridge, looking over his shoulder as the signal came through. "Lieutenant Morgan," he called, his voice calm but full of curiosity. "What do we have?" Morgan, the ship's lead engineer, stared at the screen in disbelief. The signal was coming from somewhere nearby. There was no star, no planet, nothing to explain the source. "It's coming from a location that shouldn't exist," Morgan said, his voice trembling slightly. "No planet, no station, nothing on any map." Captain Henson frowned. Could it be an anomaly, a glitch in the system? Morgan shook his head. "This is no glitch. This signal. It's too structured, too deliberate. It's a message of some sort, and it's coming from an object." An object. The captain narrowed his eyes. The closest thing to an object out here in the empty darkness was the vast stretch of cosmic dust and debris. Hardly a place to find anything worth investigating. But something about Morgan's words made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Set course for the source. Full power," Henson ordered. The Starfinder changed direction, heading toward the mysterious signal. As they moved, the signal grew stronger. The object was close, very close. Hours passed, and just as the crew was starting to wonder if they had been chasing an empty lead, they saw it. A massive black silhouette against the void of space. It wasn't a planet or a station, and it certainly wasn't a ship. It was something far stranger, something that should not exist. Henson ordered the crew to prepare for landing. The object was enormous, easily larger than any ship or station the crew had ever encountered. It was covered in a dark, smooth material that seemed to shimmer in the light of distant stars. Strange markings ran along its surface, lines that twisted and turned in ways no one could decipher. "Is it some kind of ancient station?" Morgan asked, his voice filled with awe. "It doesn't look like anything we've ever seen," the captain replied. "Could be alien tech, maybe from a race long gone. Whatever it is, we need to know more." They made their approach. The closer they got, the more they felt the weight of the unknown. Every member of the crew could feel it. The unmistakable sense of danger that hung in the air. They had no idea what they were about to face, but there was no turning back now. The mystery was too great, and they had come too far to simply leave. They docked, the Starfinder securing its position against the surface of the strange object. The crew gathered in the airlock, preparing to step onto something that could change everything. "We don't know what we're walking into," Captain Henson said, as he gave one last look at his crew. "Stay alert. No matter what happens, we stick together." "Understood." "Understood, sir," the crew replied in unison. With a heavy breath, Henson activated the airlock and stepped into the unknown. The sound of the airlock's door hissing open echoed in the cold silence of the ship. The crew followed, stepping out onto the surface of the object. It was eerily quiet. The ground beneath their feet was hard, smooth, and unnaturally cold. No dust, no debris. It was as if the place had been untouched for millennia. But there was something else, something far stranger. The moment they stepped onto the surface, a low hum filled the air, as if the object itself had come alive. "Did anyone else hear that?" Lieutenant Morgan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Henson nodded. "I hear it. Whatever this thing is, it's not dead." Suddenly, a flash of light erupted from the surface. The crew jumped back in alarm. their hearts pounding in their chests. Before they could react, the light faded, leaving behind a strange mark in the shape of a doorway. It was glowing faintly. The crew exchanged nervous glances. The hum had grown louder now, vibrating in their bones. "Captain, we have to go through," Morgan said, his voice filled with a mix of fear and fascination. There was no hesitation in Henson's voice as he looked at the glowing doorway. "We have no choice. This is what we came for." Together, they stepped through the doorway, crossing into the unknown. The crew had discovered something that shouldn't exist. A ship, or perhaps a station, older than any civilization they knew, and its secrets were just beginning to reveal themselves. As they entered, the door slammed shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. The awakening. The air inside the ship, or whatever it was thick and cold. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the heavy silence of the unknown swallowed them whole. The only sound was the faint hum that seemed to come from every direction, reverberating through their bones. It was not a natural hum. It was a pulse, almost like the heart of the object itself. Captain Henson led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The walls around them were smooth and metallic, yet they seemed to ripple like liquid. The strange markings from the exterior of the ship continued inside, etched into the walls with precision that spoke of technology far beyond anything the crew had ever encountered. "Captain, this is—" Morgan began, his voice trailing off as he took in the impossible sight. "This is nothing like anything we know. It's not just a ship, it's alive." The crew was quiet as they moved deeper into the ship. Every step felt heavier, as if the object itself was watching them, waiting. It wasn't just a piece of technology, it was a presence, and it felt as though it was aware of their every movement. Suddenly, a sharp, low noise cut through the silence. A single deep sound echoed through the corridor, making the crew jump. The walls shimmered for a moment, and then, without warning, a section of the wall in front of them shifted, opening like the petals of a flower. "Stay sharp," Henson ordered, his voice steady but filled with a sense of urgency. He motioned for his crew to follow him. The door revealed a massive chamber beyond, a room that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. The room was bathed in a strange, glowing light that flickered like stars, and in the center of the room was what appeared to be the heart of the warship, a giant, spherical core, pulsing with energy. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. It floated in midair, surrounded by floating platforms and strange machinery. The hum grew louder as they approached, vibrating through their bodies, making it almost impossible to think straight. "Is this the power source?" Lieutenant Morgan asked, his voice barely audible. "I don't think so," Henson replied. "This isn't just power. It's something more. It's almost like it's alive. Look at the way it moves." The sphere seemed to shift, its surface rippling like water disturbed by a breeze. For a moment, the crew stood frozen in awe. But then, without warning, the sphere flashed, releasing a shockwave that sent them flying back. The lights flickered, and the room was thrown into darkness. For a moment, there was silence. "What the hell was that?" one of the crew members gasped, slowly getting to his feet. Henson's heart raced as he tried to steady himself. "Everyone, get back." He could feel the pulse of the ship growing stronger, and it was clear that whatever was happening, it wasn't good. Then, without warning, a voice echoed through the room, a deep, resonant voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You have awakened me." The crew froze. The voice was not human, not even alien in the traditional sense. It was a sound, a tone, that seemed to resonate deep inside their minds. "Who are you?" Captain Henson demanded, stepping forward. "What is this place?" The voice responded, its tone cold and calculating. "I am the Guardian, the last of the Makers." "The Makers?" Henson asked, confused. "What do you mean? Who created you?" The voice paused for a long moment. "I was created to protect. But now I have been awakened, and I will fulfill my purpose once again." A chill ran down the crew's spines. The ship, or whatever it was alive, and it had a purpose that was beginning to reveal itself. Suddenly, the room began to shake. The walls trembled, and the floor cracked beneath their feet. The hum grew into a deafening roar as the core in the center of the room pulsed with a terrifying energy. "We need to get out of here," Morgan shouted. "Now." But before they could move, the walls around them shifted once more, sealing off the exits. The voice returned, louder this time. "You cannot leave. Not yet. You must learn what I am before you can decide your fate." The crew was trapped. The air was thick with tension, and it was clear that the warship, no, the Guardian, had a plan. And they were part of it, whether they liked it or not. "We need answers," Henson said, trying to steady his breathing. "Now, more than ever. What is it you want from us?" The voice paused, as if considering the question. Then it spoke again. "You have awakened me for a reason. But you will soon learn. You are not the only one seeking me." The room went silent again. The air was thick with the weight of those words. What was the Guardian really? And why had it chosen to reveal itself now? As the crew tried to make sense of the situation, they felt the temperature drop sharply. Something had changed. The warship, or the Guardian, had shifted from dormant to active, and the crew was at its mercy. And somewhere, deep within the ship, a new signal began to pulse, a signal that was not from the crew of the Starfinder, but from something far more dangerous. The hunt had begun. The warship's journey. The air in the chamber was thick with unease. The crew of the Starfinder stood frozen, unable to move as the Guardian's voice echoed in their minds. It was clear now. They were no longer in control. This was no longer an exploration mission. It was something far more dangerous, and their presence here had set something in motion. "We need to find a way out," Lieutenant Morgan said, his voice shaking. "This ship, it's changing. It's becoming something else." Captain Henson nodded grimly, his mind racing. They had no choice but to follow the Guardian's commands. For now. They couldn't escape, and they couldn't fight something that was as ancient and powerful as the ship seemed to be. But there was one thing Henson knew for certain. The Guardian wasn't the only thing out there. And the crew wasn't the only one drawn to this mysterious warship. Suddenly, a strange noise pierced the air. A low, humming sound, not like the one before, but more like a distant engine. A deep, ominous growl. It came from outside the chamber, and the crew felt the floor beneath them vibrate. "What is that?" Crewman Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Henson's eyes narrowed. "We're not alone." Without warning, the entire ship shook violently, throwing the crew off their feet. The hum grew louder, now accompanied by the unmistakable sound of engines, massive engines. "It's them," Morgan muttered. "The Empire. They found us." The Empire had been tracking the Starfinder ever since it had first encountered the mysterious signal. The crew had hoped to avoid them, but it was clear now that the warship was too powerful, too important, to remain hidden. The Empire had finally caught up, and they were coming in force. "We need to move now," Captain Henson barked, pulling his crew to their feet. "We'll deal with the Empire later. Right now, we need to understand this ship. The Guardian can't help us if we're dead." The walls of the chamber shuddered as another violent shake rocked the ship. The Guardian's voice returned, but this time it was more urgent. "You are in danger," it said, its tone laced with what could almost be described as concern. "The Empire will not leave you alive. They seek me." "Why?" Henson asked, his mind racing. "What do they want with you?" The Guardian responded, its voice filled with an ancient sorrow. "The Empire wishes to control me, to use me as a weapon, but I am not a weapon. I was created to protect, not destroy. If they control me, all will be lost." As the ship rocked again, the crew's worst fears were confirmed. The Empire's forces were closing in, and the warship, or rather, the Guardian, was the key to everything. If they didn't stop the Empire, it would be turned into the ultimate weapon, capable of wiping out entire civilizations. How do we stop them? Lieutenant Morgan asked, his voice desperate. We can't just fight off an entire fleet. You cannot, the Guardian replied. But you can awaken what remains of the Makers. They are the only ones who can help you. Who are the Makers? Henson demanded. What are we supposed to do? The Guardian's hum deepened as the air around them seemed to pulse. The Makers were my creators, ancient beings who built me to protect the galaxy from destruction. But they are long gone. Only fragments of their knowledge remain. You must find them. You must awaken what lies beneath the surface of this ship. The floor beneath them groaned, and the walls began to shift once again. Large sections of the ship retracted, revealing hidden chambers and corridors. It was as if the warship itself was alive, responding to the growing threat. Get ready, Captain Henson ordered. We're going deeper. Stay close, and whatever happens, don't let go of each other. The crew followed the captain as they ventured deeper into the heart of the warship. They moved through the hidden corridors, their footsteps echoing in the hollow silence. The walls seemed to pulse with life, and the air grew colder with every step. They reached a vast chamber, this one different from the others. It was unlike any room they had encountered so far. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols, and in the center of the room was a massive stone structure. It looked ancient, older than anything the crew had ever seen. This is it, Morgan whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. This is what the Guardian was talking about. At the center of the stone structure was a pedestal, upon which lay a strange crystal, glowing with an eerie blue light. This is what we need to awaken, Henson said, his voice filled with determination. He stepped forward and reached out for the crystal. The moment his fingers brushed it, a shockwave of energy surged through the room, throwing the crew backward. The crystal flared to life, its light blinding. A deep voice, different from the Guardian's, rang through the chamber, this one older, more powerful. You have found the key, the voice said, but you are not ready. The Makers will not return without a price. Before Henson could speak, the room trembled violently, and the walls began to shift. Something was awakening deep within the ship, and it wasn't just the Guardian's power. The ship was alive with ancient knowledge, and now it was testing the crew. You must prove yourselves worthy, the voice continued. Only then can the Makers return. The crew's hope for survival now rested on the knowledge buried deep within the warship. But what price would they have to pay to unlock it? And would they survive the Empire's relentless hunt before they could unlock the secrets of the Makers? The hunt for control. The moment the voice of the Makers faded, the atmosphere in the warship shifted again. The walls shook as the ship's systems hummed to life, and the crew felt as though they were no longer walking through metal, but through something alive, something ancient. The power that surged through the chamber was unlike anything they had ever felt, and it was becoming clear. The warship was not just a ship. It was a living entity, designed for a purpose far greater than anything the crew could comprehend. Stay focused, Captain Henson said, his voice calm but strained. He knew they had to stay ahead of the game. Everything depended on them finding the Makers' knowledge before the Empire did. We can't let them catch us. But the crew knew they were running out of time. The Empire's forces were closing in fast. The Starfinder had already been detected by their sensors, and the warship was now fully awake, reacting to the presence of intruders. How do we unlock the Makers' knowledge? Lieutenant Morgan asked, his voice shaking with both fear and excitement. The crystal activated, but what does it mean? How do we prove we're worthy? I don't know, Henson replied, his mind racing. But the Makers didn't just leave a key for us. They left a test, something we have to do to earn what they knew, and it's our only hope to stop the Empire. Just as Henson finished speaking, the walls trembled again, and the floor began to crack. The hum from the core grew louder, a deep, resonant sound that filled the entire chamber. It was almost as if the warship itself was reacting to the crew's presence. "I think it's trying to tell us something," Sarah, one of the crew members, said, her voice filled with awe and a hint of dread. "Look at this." On the walls, strange symbols began to glow brighter, illuminating the entire chamber in a cascade of colors. It was as though the ship was alive with energy, reacting to the crew's actions. A massive doorway appeared before them, an entrance leading deep into the heart of the warship. "We don't have much time," Henson said, motioning for the crew to follow. "We have to go now." The crew hurried into the new chamber, a vast hall filled with towering stone columns. The room was unlike anything they had seen before. It was ancient, clearly older than the ship itself. In the center of the room was a massive dormant machine, surrounded by long-forgotten artifacts. It looked like a control center, but everything about it screamed of an era long past. "This is it," Morgan whispered. "This is where the makers controlled the ship. They must have used this machine to guide it." As the crew stepped forward, the machine began to hum, its energy flowing through the chamber. Slowly, a holographic map of the galaxy appeared in the air, with one star system blinking brighter than the rest, the Starfinder's current location. "The warship is showing us the way," Henson muttered, his mind racing. "This map, it's a guide. It's leading us somewhere, to the makers." But before they could examine it further, the room shuddered violently again, and the air grew thick with tension. A loud, unmistakable sound rang out from above, a low, metallic screech. The Empire's forces were closing in. "We don't have much time," Henson said, his voice urgent. "The Empire's fleet is on its way, and they'll stop at nothing to control the warship. We need to find the Maker's knowledge now, or we're all dead." Suddenly, a new presence filled the chamber, a dark, ominous energy that seeped into every corner of the room. It was unlike anything the crew had felt before. It wasn't the power of the warship. It was something far more malevolent, something ancient. The holographic map flickered, and then a deep voice, darker than the Guardian's, colder than the ship's hum, spoke. "You are not the only ones who seek the power of the Makers." The crew froze. The voice was not just a warning, it was a promise. The floor beneath them shifted, revealing the hidden doorway. The voice came again, louder this time, echoing through the room with a terrifying certainty. "You must choose," the voice said. "The Maker's knowledge is not for the weak. The power you seek will come with a price. Those who are not worthy will be destroyed." The crew was left standing in the silent chamber, unsure of what to do next. The map of the galaxy continued to blink, showing them the path they needed to take to find the Maker's knowledge. But the new voice, the dark one, had made it clear. They weren't the only ones searching for the power within the warship. Someone, or something, had followed them. And now the true test was about to begin. Henson looked at his crew, their faces pale and uncertain. "We have no choice," he said, his voice firm. "We can't let the Empire control this warship, and we can't let whatever else is out there stop us. We find the Makers. We unlock their secrets. We finish this." As they stepped toward the new doorway, the ground trembled once more. The dark energy was growing stronger, and with it came the certainty of what lay ahead. The warship's secrets, the Maker's power, and the unstoppable force of the Empire's fleet. The battle for control had begun. The final battle. The air in the warship was thick with anticipation. Every step the crew took seemed to echo in the silence of the massive chamber. The map of the galaxy still hung in the air, flashing with urgent signals. It was clear now. They were headed towards something far more dangerous than they had originally thought. The warship was not only a key to the galaxy's survival, it was a weapon that could decide its fate. As Captain Henson and his crew moved toward the new doorway, a cold, suffocating presence pressed in on them. The voice that had spoken to them before, the dark one, was still echoing in the back of their minds. It was a warning, yes, but it was also a promise. Only the worthy would survive what lay ahead. "We have to move," Henson said, his voice steady despite the tension. "The Maker's knowledge is just beyond this door, but we have to hurry. The Empire is close, and whatever else is out there, it's only a matter of time before it finds us." Lieutenant Morgan's eyes darted around the chamber. "But what if we aren't worthy? What if we fail the test?" "The test," Henson said, his eyes hardening with resolve, "is survival. We've made it this far. We keep going. If we die, we die fighting." The crew nodded grimly, understanding that the path they were on would either lead to the salvation of the galaxy or its destruction. The doorway ahead of them began to glow with a soft, pulsating light. As they approached, it slowly opened, revealing what appeared to be a massive hall, bathed in strange, flickering blue lights. The floor was made of the same smooth, organic material they had seen throughout the warship, and towering structures lined the edges of the room, stretching up into the shadows above. In the center of the room stood an altar, simple in design but massive in scale. Atop it lay a glowing orb, pulsating with energy. It was the heart of the Maker's knowledge, the source of everything the crew had been searching for. Before they could step forward, however, the air shifted. The oppressive, dark presence from before was stronger now, and the crew felt the temperature drop, as if they had entered the heart of a storm. "You have come for the Makers," the voice echoed again, darker, colder. "But what are you willing to sacrifice for their power?" The orb at the center of the room began to pulse faster, its light growing more intense with each beat. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in, and the crew felt the weight of the ship itself pressing down on them. The warship was no longer just a vessel. It was alive with purpose, and that purpose was coming into focus. "Take it," Captain Henson said, his voice full of command. "This is the only way we'll survive. We need the power to fight the Empire, to stop them from turning this ship into a weapon of mass destruction." But as Henson stepped forward, a low growl reverberated from the shadows. Out of the darkness, figures began to emerge. Tall, hooded beings cloaked in black, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. They were not human, nor alien, but something else entirely, something ancient. They were the guardians of the Maker's knowledge, and they would not let the crew take it without a fight. "They are the ones who failed the test," the voice explained, now cold and unforgiving. "They were once like you, but they gave in to greed. They are the price of knowledge, the cost of power." The figures moved swiftly, their forms a blur of black and blue, their eyes burning with unearthly energy. The crew scrambled to defend themselves, but the Guardians were too fast, too powerful. They swarmed the crew, striking with an intensity that left no room for escape. "This is it," Morgan gasped, backing into a corner as one of the Guardians lunged at him. "We were never supposed to win. This is their final test." Henson fought back fiercely, using everything at his disposal. But the Guardians were relentless, their movements fluid and impossible to predict. With every strike, the crew was pushed further back, forced into a circle with no way out. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in even more, and the pulsing orb at the center of the room beat faster and faster, as though it were feeding on the chaos around it. "Captain," Sarah shouted, "we can't fight them. We have to do something, or we'll all die." The captain's mind raced. The Guardians weren't just physical opponents. They were part of the warship's design. They were the final test, a measure of worthiness. To defeat them, they didn't need brute force. They needed something the warship couldn't anticipate. Henson's eyes fell on the orb. It was the heart of the Maker's knowledge, the key to everything. But it was also the weapon, the source of power, and it was clear that the Guardians were trying to protect it from being taken. "Wait," Henson shouted, holding up his hand. "Everyone, stop." For a brief moment, the Guardians hesitated. The pulse of the orb slowed, and the chamber seemed to pause, caught in a delicate balance between destruction and salvation. "Captain, what are you doing?" Morgan asked, his voice strained. Henson turned to face the Guardians, then to the orb. The test isn't about defeating them. It's about understanding what we're truly fighting for. The knowledge the makers left behind isn't just power, it's responsibility. We have to show that we can handle it, not with violence, but with wisdom. The Guardian stood still for a moment, as though considering his words. The orb's light flickered once, then slowly began to dim. Then the voice of the Maker spoke again, softer this time, almost as if it had been watching, waiting. You have proven yourselves worthy. The knowledge is yours. The Guardian stepped back, dissolving into the shadows, leaving the crew standing before the orb. The chamber quieted, and the oppressive presence lifted, replaced by a sense of clarity. Captain Henson stepped forward cautiously, placing his hand over the orb. As he did, a flood of information surged through his mind. The knowledge of the Makers, their history, their purpose, and the truth about the Warship. The Warship wasn't just a weapon. It was a protector, a guardian of the galaxy against an ancient cosmic force that sought to bring about the galaxy's destruction. And the crew of the Starfinder had just inherited the mantle. The final battle wasn't just against the Empire. It was against an unseen, far more dangerous enemy,